Hello everyone. Now it's time for us to look on to the second video of our subject microprocessor and microcontroller, and now we are going to study the first module in detail. Okay, so actually in the last video, that means in the first video and all, I told you some basic things regarding microprocessor. Okay, the basic concepts regarding microprocessors were already handled in the first video. Okay, what was actually microprocessor, how it is actually embedded within the system, okay, how it looks like, then what is the basic functional units that is present within a microprocessor, then how can you differentiate a single chip microprocessor with the multi-processing systems, how can you differentiate microprocessor with microcontrollers, and what were the various features of microprocessors. So like basic concepts and all we already covered in the first video. Now we are going to start the class actually with the topics which is actually specified in your syllabus. Okay, your syllabus actually starts with this particular topic, that is evolution of microprocessor. But the thing is that it is not at all convenient for us to directly go into this particular topic without having a complete awareness on what is actually a microprocessor and on the basic details regarding this IC chip, that is microprocessor. Okay, so now we can purely start with the first topic of our first module syllabus. Okay, so how did microprocessor evolve so far? That is actually what we are going to look on to this particular topic. Okay, so what is the evolution of microprocessor, or simply we can say how can you explain the history of microprocessor. So in the last video itself I told you that 4004 microprocessor, the microprocessor 4004 is regarded as the first invented microprocessor, and that too was manufactured by the famous company Intel itself. Okay, so which was the first microprocessor invented so far? It is the microprocessor 4004. Okay, and we had some detailed information regarding processor 8086, that's all. Okay, but the thing is that after the invention of the first microprocessor 4004, okay, over all these years various number of processors were invented by the various manufacturers. Okay, so somehow or the other we have to understand, otherwise we have to find out some details regarding the various microprocessors that were invented so far. Okay, so that's what we are going to look on to in this particular topic. Okay, so actually in order to explain the history of microprocessor or how it evolved all these years, it is always easy for us to explain it in terms of the number of bits it will be able to define in a particular second. That means each and every microprocessor is defined in terms of its capacity. Okay, I want to say you one thing. The basic concept you have to understand is that each and every microprocessor is defined in terms of its capacity. So what is its capacity? That means how many bits of data they can process in a particular second, in a particular moment of time, how many bits of data they can process, that defines its capacity. So for example, if you define a 4-bit microprocessor, then it means that this particular microprocessor can process only 4 bits of data. Okay, if it is 8-bit microprocessor, then that specific microprocessor will be able to process only 8 bits of data. So each and every microprocessor that has been invented so far is explicitly defined in terms of its capacity. That means in terms of which how much amount of data, that is how many bits of data they will be able to process in a particular moment of time or in a particular instance of time. Okay, so I think in order to explain the concept evolution of microprocessor, otherwise in order to go into the detailed level of the history of microprocessor, it is always easy for us to define in terms of these categories of microprocessor. That is, what are the various 4-bit microprocessors, what were the various 8-bit microprocessors which were invented so far, likewise what were the various 16-bit, 32-bit and 64-bit microprocessors invented so far. So likewise, defining each and every microprocessors in terms of its capacity, I think we can look on to the detailed view of the evolution or history of microprocessor. Okay, so let us look on to each and every one in detail. Okay, so first of all itself the 4-bit processor. So I told you in the first class itself the microprocessor 4004 was regarded as the first microprocessor implemented or otherwise invented by the company Intel. Okay, it was in the year 1971. So please remind one thing. Okay, our first microprocessor was invented in the year 1971. Okay, and that was the processor 4004, and the image is given just in the right hand side of the slide. Okay, and it was manufactured by the company Intel itself. Okay, and that specific processor was actually a 4-bit microprocessor. That means 4004 was regarded as a 4-bit microprocessor which was capable of processing 4 bits of data at a time. Only 4 bits of data were processed by this particular 4004 processor in a particular instance of time. Okay, the next three things that they have specified here is that regarding the number of transistors, the clock speed, and the amount of instructions they will be able to execute in a second. Okay, so thing is that actually the microprocessors is fabricated using simple semiconductor chips as well as using IC chips, and also with a large number of transistors. So this 4004 microprocessor was actually fabricated using 2300 transistors. So the thing is that you need not memorize these points and all regarding each and every microprocessor, because such type of questions won't be asked for university examination. But the thing is that since the topic evolution of microprocessor is already included in your syllabus, you need to be aware on at least some basic concepts regarding the various types of processors that were invented so far. That's all. Okay, one thing I want to note you that the clock speed of a microprocessor, actually how can you define the clock speed or otherwise the clock rate of a particular processor? You know one thing, that each and every microprocessor is having an internal clock which is inbuilt within it in order to support the microprocessor. Okay, each and every processor, okay, or otherwise a microprocessor is having an internal clock, okay, which will be helping the processor to do its normal functioning. Okay, so as the speed of the clock increases, okay, the processor will be able to perform the operations very fastly. If you are having a very slow clock within the processor will be able to do the operations very slowly. So the speed of a particular processor will also depend upon the speed of the clock which is supporting it. Okay, so in the case of 4004, it was having a clock whose speed was just 740 kilohertz. Okay, so simply you note one thing, that what was the clock speed of the microprocessor that was invented in the 1971, and also going on to the details of each and every processor in the coming slide and all, you will be able to realize how functionalities have expanded or how features have enhanced, okay, over all these years of invention. Okay, so just these things you have to note in the case of 4004 microprocessor, and this processor was able to execute only 60,000 instructions per second. One thing more I have to say is that I told you about the clock speed. Okay, the clock rate is actually mainly influenced based on the clock whatever is residing within this microprocessor. Okay, if you are having a clock which is much speedy, then the processing functions also can be carried out more speedy. Okay, if you are having a clock which is having a speed very lesser, then naturally the processor will also do its operations very slowly. Okay, so thing is that what is actually clock speed or otherwise clock rate? How can you define the clock speed of a processor? It is actually the number of operations or procedures that is carried out by a processor in a specific amount of time. Okay, how many number of operations a particular processor can execute or perform in a particular instance of time, that is actually the clock speed or clock rate. So if you are having a very fast clock which is able to support your processor, then naturally whatever operations that is carried out by the processor will be done very fastly. That is more amount of instructions or more amount of operations can be carried out in a particular instance of time. That is what clock speed specifies. Okay, so naturally with respect to each and every processor, we will be saying some basic concepts regarding this clock speed, the number of transistors, and the number of instructions they will be able to execute per second. But the thing is that there is no need to memorize these things and all, because such type of questions won't be asked for university examination. The thing is that at least you have to be aware on the thing that such type of microprocessors existed so far. Okay, that's all. The next 4-bit microprocessor invented was 4040. Okay, the next 4-bit microprocessor, I told you we are going to study the history of microprocessor based on these aspects, that is based on the capacity of microprocessor, that is how much data they'll be able to process in a particular instance of time. In that particular basis we are going to define the history of a microprocessor. So now first of all itself we are looking onto the 4-bit microprocessors that were invented so far. The second 4-bit microprocessor that was invented was 4040, but in the year 1974. Okay, but don't think that between the years 1971 and 1974 they did not go for any invention of any microprocessor. Please don't think like that. Okay, between these 2 years, in the year 1972 they invented an 8-bit microprocessor. But the thing is that I am explaining each and every microprocessor in terms of its capacity. So first of all, in the first slide itself, I am going to have a detailed view on. I am going to teach you on the microprocessor which is purely 4-bit. That's all. Okay, so 4040 was the second microprocessor that they invented. Sorry, not the second microprocessor, was the second 4-bit microprocessor that they invented in the year 1974. Okay, that's all the features they have given in order to explain this processor. It did not get much popularity. That was a basic thing we have to understand. Okay, 4040 microprocessor did not gain much popularity. Okay, and that's all we have to look onto this particular microprocessor. So it looks like what it is shown in this particular figure. Okay, so these two processors only need to be aware based on this 4-bit microprocessor. The next category of microprocessors are 8-bit microprocessor. We are going to study based on the capacity of a microprocessor. That is, now we are going to look on to those processors which will be able to process 8 bits of data at a time. Okay, such kinds of microprocessors are called as 8-bit microprocessor. The first 8-bit microprocessor that they invented was 8008 in the year 1972. Okay, that means this 8008 microprocessor is able to process 8 bits of data at a time. Okay, so hope you know what is a 4-bit data, what is an 8-bit data, etc. Okay, so the basic thing you have to understand, or otherwise you have to be reminded at this particular time, is that whatever data we provide to the processor in order to do various operations, it has to be in the form of hexadecimal values. Okay, only hexadecimal values will be accepted by the processor in order to do further operations. So if you want to add 10 plus 3, if you want to find the sum of 10 and 3, then you have to convert the decimal value 10 into the corresponding hexadecimal value. As you know that the hexadecimal value of 10 is A, you have to provide the input values as A and 3. 0A and 03 has to be provided. Then only they will be finding out the corresponding sum and providing the correct result in front of us. Okay, so simply be aware that what all data, or otherwise what all input we are going to give to the corresponding processor, it must be purely in the form of hexadecimal values. Okay, okay, so hope you are aware on what is actually 4-bit data, 8-bit data, etc. Okay, so 8008 was the first 8-bit microprocessor. The clock speed was 500 kilohertz. I told you what is actually clock speed. It defines a number of operations that a particular processor can execute in a particular instance of time, and it is purely defined in terms of the clock that is actually there within the internal system. Okay, there will be an internal clock within the system, and based on that particular clock we can define the clock speed of a processor. So in the case of 8008 processor, the clock speed was 500 kilohertz, and also they were able to execute 50,000 instructions per second. Just 50,000 instructions per second. Okay, so actually it is a very less amount of instructions as far as the latest microprocessors are compared. Okay, the latest microprocessors are able to execute some millions of instructions per second. So as far as such type of microprocessors are concerned, these 8008 processors are having an execution rate of only 50,000 instructions per second. Okay, so this is actually 8008 chip. Okay, the next the second microprocessor, that is the second 8-bit microprocessor they invented, was 8080. Okay, the first one was 8008. Please note that difference. Okay, sometimes it will be creating a sort of confusion for you. Okay, the second microprocessor, 8-bit microprocessor they invented was 8080, and it was also in the year 1974. So note one thing, that in the year 1974, the Intel manufacturers invented the 4-bit microprocessor, that is 4040, and also an 8-bit microprocessor, that is 8080. Okay, so let us look on to the details of this 8080. You can see the IC chip 8080 in the right hand side of the slide. Okay, so the clock speed of this 8080 is 2 megahertz. See, now the clock speed has raised. Okay, in the first 8-bit microprocessor, that is 8008, it was just 500 kilohertz. Now the clock speed raised to 2 megahertz. Okay, so that means that much amount of operations can be performed by this 8080 instructions in a particular instance of time, and it consisted of 6000 transistors. 6000 transistors were used in order to fabricate this 8080 microprocessor, and it is 10 times faster than 8008. Okay, see, our 8008 was able to execute only 50,000 instructions per second. On the other hand, our second microprocessor, second 8-bit microprocessor, that is 8080, were able to execute 5 lakhs instructions per 5 lakhs instruction per second, that is 50,000 for 10 times faster, that means 5 lakh instructions per second. This corresponding processor were able to execute. Okay, next let us look on to the remaining 8-bit processors. Okay, the third processor that they invented, 8-bit processor that they invented, was 8085. Okay, so you have to have some more additional knowledge regarding 8085, because the thing is that the microprocessor that is included in your syllabus is 8086. We need to have a deeper study on the microprocessor 8086. Okay, but the thing is that that microprocessor, that is a microprocessor 8086, has got its derivation from this microprocessor, that is 8085. So to some extent possible, you have to be aware on this particular microprocessor, that is 8085, because this 8085 microprocessor higher version is 8086. Okay, 8086 microprocessor was designed from 8085. Okay, there is a very slight difference between this 8085 and 8086 microprocessor. Okay, so this 8085 microprocessor was invented in the year 1976. It too was an 8-bit microprocessor, that is, it was able to execute only 8 bits of data at a time. Okay, the clock speed is 3 megahertz. Okay, the last microprocessor that we found was 2 megahertz clock speed. Okay, now this corresponding microprocessor is having 3 megahertz clock speed. Okay, and regarding the database and address bus, that I will tell you when we go into the detailed side of bus organization or bus structure. Okay, so just be aware that 8085 microprocessor is having an 8-bit data bus and 16-bit address bus. Simply you have to be aware at this particular moment of time. Okay, the details regarding what is actually bus, what are the various types of bus and all, we will be studying in the coming videos. Okay, when we study about the bus architecture, bus organization of a particular processor. Okay, and not only that, this 8085 microprocessor is having 6500 transistors. That is, 6500 transistors were used in order to fabricate this processor, and they were able to execute 7,69,230 instructions per second. That is, the amount of instructions they were able to execute per second was 7,69,230 instructions. Okay, and they were also able to access 64 kilobytes of memory, and in total they were 246 instructions. Actually, you know, these processors are not having a memory or brain of its own. Okay, so the thing is that we have to feed from A to Z whatever they have to perform. Okay, in terms of various programs. Okay, in terms of programs only, we can make them understand what is the actual operations they have to perform. Okay, and such programs are actually a set of instructions. A group or collection of instructions are called as programs. So in the case of 8085 microprocessor, there are in total 246 instructions in their instruction set. So from these instruction set, from the 246 instructions which are available in the instruction set, we will be able to collect, or we will be able to use according to our convenience, so as to form the corresponding program. Okay, which will be helpful for them in order to do the procedures. Okay, actually this 8085 microprocessor was highly popular. Okay, around 100 million copies were sold. That is 100 million 8085 microprocessor IC chip were sold. That means it gained high popularity at that particular time. Okay, that means in the year 1976 it gained much popularity than the rest of the microprocessors. Okay, the next microprocessor is 8086. Actually, this is the microprocessor that we are going to study in detail since it is actually involved in our syllabus. Okay, so this 8086 microprocessor was invented in the year 1970. That is, I think, 2 years after the invention of the processor 8085. Okay, so it was the first 16-bit processor. So we have started studying the 16-bit processor. All those processors that we studied till 8085 were 8-bit processors. Okay, so the thing is that now we are going to start studying regarding the 16-bit processors. Okay, the first 16-bit processor that they invented were 8086. Okay, and this 8086 processor need to be studied by us in detail since it is provided in the syllabus. Okay, and the clock speed of this 8086 microprocessor was 4.77 megahertz, 8 megahertz and 10 megahertz. That is, there were three internet clocks available for the normal functioning of the processor. So one clock was 4.77 megahertz, the second 8 megahertz, and the third one was 10 megahertz. Okay, so depending upon the version. So the thing is that 8085 existed in various versions. Okay, various types of 8085 processor were there. Okay, that is actually what we have to say. There were various versions, three versions of 8085 microprocessor was there. The first version of 8085 microprocessor had a clock of 4.77 megahertz, and the second version of 8085 microprocessor had a clock of 8 megahertz speed, and the third 8085 microprocessor had a clock speed of 10 megahertz. Okay, the database capacity is 16-bit and the address bus capacity is 20-bit. All those things regarding this bus structure we'll be studying in the upcoming videos. Okay, so simply be aware that 8086 microprocessor is having 16-bit database and a 20-bit address bus. And for the fabrication of this 8086 processor, they used 29,000 transistors. Okay, and they were able to execute 2.5 million instructions per second. See, I told you, now it is going to be million. Okay, the last microprocessor that we studied were 8085, and also before that it was around 8080. So they were able to execute only lakhs of instructions. Okay, some lakh range of instructions only they were able to execute. But now this particular 8086 processor, they are able to execute 2.5 million instructions per second. That is, we have increased the number of instructions which that a particular processor will be able to process. Okay, 2.5 million instructions were able to be executed in a second. Okay, and they'll be able to access 1 megabyte of memory. Actually, 8085 processor was able to access only 64 kilobytes of memory. Okay, but the thing is that 8086 they are able to process or access 1 MB of memory, and in total 22,000 instructions are there in the instruction set. In the case of 8085 it was just 246 instructions, but here in the case of 8086 there are 22,000 wide range of instructions which can be used for various purposes. Okay, which is well established in the instruction set. So the thing is that these instructions can be used by the programmer in order to create a program. For example, if you want to find the sum of two numbers, okay, if you want to find the sum of two numbers with the help of a processor, okay, that means addition is a basic principle which is carried out in this process. Okay, so the corresponding addition instruction has to be fetched from the instruction set. Okay, so from this 22,000 instructions, we will be able to easily collect, otherwise we will be able to easily find out the corresponding instruction which will be helpful for us to add into the program in order to add two numbers. That is, the corresponding instruction is add a comma b, or otherwise add ax comma bx. That is the corresponding instruction that we will be studying in the upcoming video. But the thing is that we can collectively or otherwise we can selectively find out the suitable instruction from this larger range of 26,000 instruction that will be helpful for us in order to create a program. The thing is that only by finding out a program, the processor will be able to do the corresponding operation. They are not having any brain or logic concepts of their own. We have to specify the operations whatever they had to perform only in terms of programs, and simply the program is simply a collection of instructions that must be fetched from this instruction set. And the 8086 processor is highly rich is having a high rich collection of instructions, that is 22,000 instructions are there in this instruction set, and multiplication and division operation started to be performed from this 8086 processor. Till so far, that is till 8085 microprocessor, we were not able to perform multiplication and division. Only after the invention of this 8086 microprocessor, the normal operation, that is the normal arithmetic operations such as multiplication and division, started to be executed. Okay, so this is actually the 8086 microprocessor. The next 16-bit microprocessor that we need to be aware on is 8088 microprocessor, which was invented in the year 1979. Okay, actually it was a cheaper version of the microprocessor 8086. Okay, it was not as much costly as 8086. It was a very cheap IC chip that was readily available in the market. Okay, and it was able to execute some 2.5 million instructions per second. Okay, it also became popular in the computer industry when IBM used it for the first PC. So please be aware that this type of questions can be asked for any interview, that IBM used the microprocessor 8088 in order to implement it for its first PC. Okay, in order to fabricate or otherwise in order to design its first PC, personal computer, it used a microprocessor, what it is, 8088, which was manufactured already by Intel. Okay, so the 8088 microprocessor, which was already manufactured by Intel, was actually used in order to in order to design the first first personal computer, okay, by the IBM company, and hence it gained much popularity. Okay, so the next microprocessor that we are going to study are 80186 and 80388. Okay, so 80186 and 80188 both were 16-bit microprocessors which were invented in the year 1982. The clock speed were 6 megahertz. Okay, but the thing in difference between these two things, that is 80188 and 80186, is that the difference that is coming behind between them is that 80188 was a cheaper version of 80186. Okay, and additional components were also there in this particular microprocessors. There were interrupt controllers, clock generators, local bus controllers, and also counters. So these four additional features were also added into the microprocessor, that is 80186 and 80188. Okay, so these are the figures that represents 80186 processor and 80188 processor. Okay, so the next microprocessor that we are going to study is the 16-bit microprocessor itself, 80286, which was invented in the year 1982, which had a clock speed of 8 megahertz. Okay, so you remember one thing, we started with the microprocessor which were having clock speed of at only kilohertz. The clock speed which were ranging only in terms of kilohertz, which were defined only in terms of kilohertz. Now it has come to 8 megahertz. Okay, so now the processor 808286 is having a clock speed of 8 megahertz, and also 16 MB of memory can be accessed with the help of this 80286, and they were actually fabricated with the help of 1,34,000 transistors. Okay, and they were able to execute 4 million instructions per second. Okay, so this is actually the figure which denotes the IC chip 80286, and that was a 16-bit processor. Okay, so now we are going to start with the 32-bit microprocessor. Okay, so the 32-bit microprocessor which was invented first by the Intel company is the 80386, which was the first 16-bit microprocessor that they have invented. It was 8086. 8086 was considered as the first 16-bit microprocessor, which was the first 8-bit microprocessor that they invented. It was 8-bit microprocessor. It was 8085. Okay, which was the first 4-bit microprocessor, 4004. So the first 4-bit microprocessor was 4004. The first 8-bit microprocessor is 8085, and the first I have to correct one thing. The first 8-bit microprocessor was 8008. Okay, so let me tell you once more. The first 4-bit microprocessor invented was 4004. The first 8-bit microprocessor invented was 8008. The first 16-bit microprocessor that they invented was 8085, and the first 16-bit microprocessor that they invented is 8086, and the first 32-bit microprocessor that they invented was 80386. Okay, hope it is clear. Once more, the first 4-bit microprocessor invented was 4004. The first 8-bit microprocessor that they invented was 8008. Okay, it is clear. The first 16-bit microprocessor was 8086, and the first 32-bit microprocessor was 80386. Okay, hope it is almost clear. So the thing is that this microprocessor, that is 80386, is capable of addressing 4 GB of memory. See, our memory accessing capacity has raised. Okay, 4 GB of memory, up to 4 GB of memory, this corresponding microprocessors were able to access. So how many transistors were used in order to fabricate this processor? It was 2,75,000 transistors. And its clock speed, we cannot say specifically. Its clock speed ranged from 16 megahertz to 33 megahertz. Okay, based on various versions. See, I told you before, this processor is also existing in various versions. Actually, 8085 processor also had various versions. Likewise, 80386 processor is also designed in terms of various versions, that is 80386 DX, SX or SL. Okay, 3 versions of 80386 were invented. Okay, so it became the best selling microprocessor in history. So 80386, which was the first 32-bit microprocessor, okay, was highly popular, okay, and was the best selling microprocessor in history. Okay, so this is the actual figure which shows the figure of the 32-bit processor, which is 80386. Okay, so the next the next